Today, I'm joined by Josh Schuminsky and Nike Roach from Solutions Afoot, one of Caspio's premier partners. And today, they'll be sharing their thoughts about building the architecture of a relationship. Welcome, Josh and Nike, and thank you for joining Caspio's Low Code, High Impact podcast. So, Josh, why not kick us off and share with everyone a little bit about your background and your company?
So, I'm Josh Schuminsky. I've been doing Caspio for over 20 years, and prior to Solutions Afoot, I helped the state of Minnesota develop their insurance marketplace. And I've taken the skills used with that build and started the Solutions Afoot. And in 2022, we brought on partners, and that's where Nike and Chris and now Miles have come in the hand.
Okay. Niki, what about you?
I'm Chief Business Development Officer, as Josh had alluded to, for Solutions Afoot. I originally come from healthcare. Josh and I met at a mutual business group, and we've formed a friendship. And then when he said he was expanding Solutions Afoot and really going after becoming the premier Caspio developer, it's kind of easy to do. It's simple to say you can do it by yourself, but when you realize that as you grow, you're going to need other people because you can't do everything. So my job is to go out and interact with folks and see what their problems are and triage and see if we can build a solution for them.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. So for those that are not aware of Solutions Afoot, why don't you share with everyone a little bit about what the company does and what it focuses on?
So Solutions Afoot focuses on helping companies with their pain points. My voice is going, for whatever reason. So if you have a pain point with your company, whether it's through your process or anything related to your company, Solutions Afoot tries to come in and triage that pain point with software. And 9 times out of 10, we find the right solutions for our business, and business moves on because it's more profitable and more productive.
Yeah. So, Josh and Niki, remind me, how many customers of Caspio do you work with on a regular basis?
On a regular basis, I think we have 15 continuous builds currently that at different stages of the builds. So, we're at, at any time we could be doing, a developer could be doing multiple builds per team. So,
and I know that from the customer base you've got, it's a whole mixture of customers, all different sizes, all different industries. Is there any specific industry or customer you think that's our sweet spot?
Niki?
Well, yeah, I mean, and as you alluded to, we're sort of agnostic development shop. We have everything from aviation to the Department of Veterans Affairs to small mom and pops. But what we, after we've been around for a little while, and I say a little while, very little while, as a cohesive group together, Josh was doing this, of course, by himself. I mean, a few others. We found that HVAC and nonprofits and logistics seems to be our sweet spot because we keep coming in contact with that business group. And it seemed like there's just been some really good wins in that regards.
Yeah. And I know from looking at LinkedIn and talking to you guys, it's quite exciting times at Solutions Afoot as well, is that you launched some new software over the last couple of days called Brandsona. So why not explain what that is?
I'll be happy to. So Brandsona was the brainchild of an internal problem we have. As a full Caspio development shop, we build both back end and front end. And so the problem is front end. It's when you think about front end, you think about what's the look and feel of any organization, what's the colors, what's the fonts, what's the messaging. All those things became problematic for us. So it became, as a solution, we started working on it internally, and then Chris, who's our chief knowledge officer, along with Kelsey, who's our director of marketing, and since her background is in marketing, along with myself and Josh and Miles and the rest of the gang, we started to brainstorm and said, this problem happens across the board. So Brandsona's design and functionality is really to make sure that no matter where the company is or all the professionals, and I'll give you a scenario, perfect scenario. You're a shop, you're an HVAC company. I'll go for that. But you not only have a digital format, but you also have a print format. Maybe it's brochures or something like that. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, most shops don't have two houses they work from. So if you're a print shop, they design from one perspective, and then you have a digital shop. Well, those different professionals, maybe it's a graphic artist, maybe it's a web developer, maybe it's a photographer, maybe it's a social media manager. All those different professionals come into different, and maybe they're stateside, or maybe you're outsourcing them. They needed a central portal so that they can also all know the color, the dynamic, the messaging, to be able to maintain the brand's integrity. And as we look across the industry, there's a couple of them who have partially what that was, but we are like, okay, it's a problem for us, and we know it's a problem for other companies, be they a small mom and pop, even up to the enterprise shop, because enterprise organizations, there is a specific color. And I'll give you a weird example. One of my friends does this example and had somebody fly all the way down from New York for about a 15-minute meeting just to make sure they had the right color. I'm not making this up. Oh. They flew down from North just to come in and look to make sure that was the right color to approval. But if you can find a central place, not everything is that broad and that big. You can do this with making sure that you have all the colors and all the different platforms. It registers so that a little red or a little blue here or a little bit of say magenta, it all looks consistent across it. And that's in essence of what Brandsona is. And we have other tools in there which are awesome because I like to do them. and it's just been working out so far. So we just launched it, and we're giving folks an opportunity to test it out, to see if it makes sense for them.
I think it's super smart. I think it's a big opportunity here for customers once they delve into it and have a play around with it. But yeah, I think it's a great addition to what you offer customers. So as we move into the theme of today's podcast, which is building the architecture of relationships, so why do you think this is important for Solutions Afoot in what you do on your day-to-day basis?
So I'll begin on this one. So as Nike was referencing before, when we first met, we met in a networking group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we basically took 2 years plus to get to know each other. We started out doing some power walks, thanks to Nike, and getting to know each other, getting crawling before we walk, walking before we run, and we wouldn't have become partners if we didn't build that relationship, right? So it's a great story. So we started out with Nike's other company, 6th Sense. They were a beta for another company that I was with, right? And my then partner made Nike's CEO cry 2 days in a row, and Nike's like, I can't have you interfere with my happiness. And the next day I called my partner and said, I'm done. If you're treating our beta like this, what are you going to do to actual customers? And so I got bought out by them, and it went a long way to building that relationship with Nike and his partner at 6th Sense. And so you're building upon, you're stacking wins upon wins for that relationship. And that's how you build a partnership, and a relationship between you and a customer works the same way.
Yeah. I wanted, if you don't mind me, Paul, I wanted to elaborate on it just a little, just give it a little bit of context. So the best time to see a person's character, is when things go wrong. It's not when things are great. When things are terribly, and at that time it was a catastrophe. Lots of emotion in that regards, and to see how and the person, it was a breach of trust, and I won't go into any particular story, but it was a breach of trust, and in our business, trust is important. Transparency is important. And when you violate that trust egregiously, then it was, okay, things have to be adjusted. And Josh appropriately severed ties with that partner. And when I saw that, it got me thinking. I said, wow, it's impressive. Someone to really, when somebody does something really, really bad. And that's what tuned me into Josh and helped me connect with him a little bit more, not just in the business, but as a friend, and as a confidant, is to see how he addressed. And I realized this is a person who operates with a high level of integrity. And you don't always see that in certain sectors. And so that's how we started. And as he says, those power walks, and like he said it, we walked to learn. And I find that if I walk with somebody long enough, I learn more about them. And that's how we have a connection. And then we're building an enterprise and involving other people that we learn and we appreciate. And that's kind of how we do it. We kind of learn who you are, and then we invite you to be part of our organization.
I think, Nikki, what resonates with me so much there, I posted something recently on LinkedIn from Simon Sinek, and it was all around the trust, both of your team members who trust you and you trust them, but also from a customer perspective as well, is that we know people buy from people. It's the old adage. That's what happens. And I think it goes back to the trust element. So I completely hear what you're saying with things like that. And I think you guys at Solutions Afoot are really premier at doing that. You're out there on the road. I see that on LinkedIn all the time. You're going to events, you're meeting prospects, you're meeting with veterans. I just think you guys are really great at doing that. So what do you get kind of like a return investment from that? Do you see, obviously, you're building stronger relationships that can then turn into being stronger term or longer term customers? What do you kind of see from all this effort that you're putting into these relationship building?
So just to reference first about being on the road.
Yeah.
I've always believed in the adage, you got to be in the room to make a deal, right? Alexander Hamilton said it best, you got to be in the room.
Yeah.
So if you're in the room and you tend to the little things like showing up, being prepared to do business with if someone says, come out to the left coast to meet with us, we're on a plane, we'll be there. And we've got customers from that mentality.
Yeah.
And if you show up and do a good job, you're going to continue building that relationship further and further. And we live by that.
And if you don't mind me adding a little bit more context to that as well. So, and I like doing that. It's kind of what it is. Sorry.
He likes to talk.
I know. I do. And I'll only because we just recently got back from an event in the Bay Area, which was all about startups. And although many of the startups are not at the place right now where they can, for lack of a better word, afford our services. I mean, we're not super expensive, but we're not super cheap. But there's a lot of folks who are barely, they had the big barrel steel to even get to this event. And I remember listening to, it was a talk, just a fireside chat with the founder of Zapier and Wade. And Wade was talking about just what Josh said. You have to be where your customers are. And Wade, he's originally from Columbia, Missouri. That's where Zapier got started. And he realized that in order for him to tap into the market, which was a lot of tech companies, and Zapier integrates with practically everything. If you're integrating, we do integrations too, but Zapier integrates with Salesforce and all the other big name. But he had to be where his customers were. So he relocated the entire corporation into the Bay Area. So it's just like Josh says, when you're thinking of a remote shop, and because although we're stateside, we're remote mostly. Our developers are spread across North America, but even though we could just stay in our little bubble of North Carolina, we have customers in every walk of life. And if that's in the defense community, we need to be in DC. If we're in the tech community, we need to be in the San Francisco Bay Area. If we're in a commerce industry, we need to be either in Charlotte, Atlanta, or New York. Wherever there's a hub or there's a customer, we will show up because we find that organically you learn more about a business if you're actually in the business, in the building, talking to, the stakeholders. And sometimes the stakeholder is the CEO, and sometimes the stakeholder is the person who simply answers the phone.
Was there a point, I'm just thinking, when you thought, actually, Zoom's not going to work for us. We need to get on that plane or get in the car or the train and go meet these customers in person? Was this, I'm suspecting this was happening before COVID anyway. And then obviously you were hindered with doing that type of meet and greet in person during COVID, like all of us were. And then afterwards, I'm sure you started again. But was there a point when you thought, actually, we need to start being more out there meeting customers in person?
So Nick and I are both old-fashioned networkers. We met through networking. We've built our business through networking. Why would you, if you're a business or especially a small business, why wouldn't you network?
Yeah.
You meet like businesses, and most likely those businesses need your services. They may not be able to afford your services at first, but as they grow and you build a relationship with them, eventually they're going to come back around and use you because you're there. And as you're there, you give them that opportunity to actually say, "Hey, Josh, Nike, I see what you guys are doing. We need you."
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about, because we know that with a lot of the larger organizations, there's always going to be one decision maker, one ultimate decision maker that signs a contract, but usually it could be a committee of people that kind of have an influence in the decision making. So how do you navigate that? Because when you go to meet a prospect, for example, do you meet the decision maker? Do you meet the team? How do you navigate through that, and kind of what strategies do you deploy?
Nike?
So that's a good question in a timely manner. So especially when you're dealing with government organizations who, the bureaucracy in the government, if you've done any work with the government, you realize that there's various levels, and the bureaucracy is not a bad thing. It's just a safety mechanism to make sure that the government or the government representative are being good stewards of the people's money. That's what their job is, to make sure that they're not, irresponsible with the people's money. But you have committees, you have an approval committee, you have a finance committee, you have an ethics committee, and so it's just a matter of understanding the dynamics of each organization. And since I've worked for the federal government before, I understand that the federal government does not make any decision except war very fast. They do that very fast, but anything else, they creepy along the way. With regards to smaller operations, be they enterprise, and when I say smaller, smaller can be depending on what you define as smaller. The decision makers can be the CEO. If you're going into a small operation where there are 10 people, but they make they make some really great products, but their company is, $100 million strong, even though there are really only 10 functional employees per se. Sometimes the decision maker is the CEO. But if you have a larger organization, especially when you have a digital platform or digital services, you have to go a little bit below. So sometimes you'll say, well, I want to talk to the CIO or the CTO. That's not always, although they're the ones who sign the check and get the approval. The people we often interact with are the people who actually do the work. Yeah. They're the ones in the background who have to solve the problems, and they have to report up to those decision makers. But oftentimes, the decision makers aren't the people who are really championed internally for us to come into their organization and solve their problems.
So, based on what you're saying there, then, so does your strategy change if you've got customers that just want to interact over a video conference, they're based remotely, versus obviously when you get to meet with them in person? Are the strategies different from yourselves?
Not really per se. The same idea Josh said earlier, networking, it's interaction. I mean, you network through the various social channels, or you get referrals from, various partners on how to be able to do that. But once you come together and you have a mutual agreement and you start building with them, now it's not always, let's come out to your shop, because that's not practical. Maybe it's a smaller project, but as the projects get bigger, and they do. And that's the thing. We believe in integrity. We believe in actually transparency. But when customers feel they like us, they trust us, and they want to get more and more. So if we build and we solve for one problem, that tends to open up other opportunities. So say we're working in an HR situation where they need to build a particular thing, or maybe there is a scheduling application here they want to build, or maybe there's another platform that they want us, which is totally different than their principal business. That's what we're looking for. The win is not that one win. It's not the two win. It's a long-standing commitment to stay with that company as long as, our relationship is strong. So the strategies don't change so much, except the process is a little longer. If it's just a quick solve, that's a couple of meetings on a Zoom or Google Meet or Teams. But if it's a bigger project, and as they feel, we will go fly, drive, train. I don't think we've done boat yet to a location to see the principals, to talk with them, because sometimes, especially when you're dealing with IP, intellectual properties that are very closely held, when you're dealing with the government space, there's some issues there. They want you on campus, at their house, in their boardroom, so that you can talk about the problems that they're looking to solve.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Niki, because you've got me thinking about really is the different stakeholders that we have when we're working with low code and we're talking to customers. I know from my side is different people have different expectations, and we do deal with a lot of technical people within these organizations. And what lessons do you have when you're dealing, say, with a commercially focused person versus somebody that's more technical? Do you have different strategies about how you maintain the relationship?
Josh?
Yeah. Tread lightly.
There you
go. So I'm not going to name any names or any clients, but we have a client who is not the greatest technological person around, but he knows what he wants. And so we get on to a Zoom or a Google Meet with them, and we let them vent about what's wrong with their company and this and that, and eventually we get to what we can solve. But that's part of any relationship is listening. So if you don't know what the daily problem is with their business, it might not be just what the software needs are, but it might be something else we might be able to help with as far as coaching or just listening to them vent. It helps.
Yeah, and you got me thinking about with regards to the way the world is today and what it could look like in the next few years and beyond that as well, and how we navigate through these relationships with AI. Obviously, we've got video conference right now. How do you see that evolving over the coming years, kind of the tech relationship, the consultancy space, as digital transformation accelerates? How do you see that moving forward?
I mean, I could be wrong. I don't see AI in its current state ever going to replace a good dev team that listens to pain points and is able to deliver on those pain points. AI might be a good co-pilot, but I don't think I can go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need a six-row portal for HVAC, and I need it to do this, and this. It's never going to create that, right? And I need to develop it in Caspio with JavaScript. No, it's just not going to happen. So, AI is as good as you teach it to be, and unless it gets to read your mind exactly, good luck.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's I think it's really interesting, and it goes back to what I said at the beginning about I still think humans buy from humans at the end of the day. People buy from people, and I think AI, like you said, is going to be a nice addition. It'll support the conversations, but I still think when it comes down to buying things of a certain value or complexity or whatever that might be, I think people want to speak to people. I think if it's just a transactional purchase, then I think, that's what AI, and keep it as simple as possible. But I think going back to what you were saying, Niki, about especially like government contracts and things like that, I can't imagine decisions are going to be made over AI and those type of things anytime soon.
No, I in talking, especially since I come from the DoD house and the VA house as well, some of those decisions and AI can be used in various capacities, but you do need an authority to sort of, pull a plug and say, okay, that doesn't work. We've estimated that this plus this is gonna, you need a mind that is not only just logical, but can rationalize outside of that. So if you're using like a chat GPT to auto generate an email or something like that, you still need something just not right.
Yeah.
There's something off that you need to edit or you need to modify. And that's sort of where I believe Josh was going, is that not right now, not in his current iteration, in some years, possibly. But in some of the stuff and we go to tech conferences, we just don't see it just yet. There's a couple of them kind of hidden off the mark that you don't hear because they're not publicly traded and they're staying out of the big, the eating frenzy, which is AI. Everybody's I was at a tech conference to go a little sideways is almost like it was AI overload. Yeah. Because anything that said AI, it's more of a brand as opposed to a practical application. They just throw AI on anything and say, oh, it has AI for this. It's marketing, but there's really, in a lot of cases, there is no use for it. So why? But it just makes people like, oh, it's exciting. It has AI with it. Okay, it's mayonnaise and peanut butter and jelly. Big deal. So
it's the current shiny tool that everyone wants to have as part of their build.
Yeah,
but is it necessary for every build? No.
Well, not at the practical sense.
Yeah. Well, I think with your relationship strategy you've got in place, I know there's a lot of mutual happy customers that you guys are working with. It's pretty clear. I've seen that on LinkedIn from the testimonials and conversations I have with them as well. So it's clearly working, the strategy you've got in place. So kind of like to wrap this up, if somebody's listening to this podcast or watching the video, what advice would you give them if they're considering low code?
My advice would be we choose a developer house that listens. If they're not listening to what you're saying and what you want, how could they develop something for you that will work for you?
Within the Caspio, and I heard another developer say this once before, who works in the Caspio space, is like, people think because it says low code, no code, it is not a giant, robust. It's like the biggest, strongest, most powerful, development platform for ability to deploy, to plug in practically anything to the darn thing, to make it, clean and sort of sandbox a couple things before you bring it out into the public eye. And they were like, it's the biggest, strongest, but it doesn't look that way. It's sort of weird. It's almost miscategorized because it seemed like, oh, it's low code, so this is for the novice. No, this is not for the novice only, but it's also for the larger enterprise government type of application. What makes Caspio in a category of his own is the ability to quickly deploy, and that saves people time, that saves people money, and that saves people frustration. When we get involved is when they go a little bit beyond what Caspio was designed for, and they start integrate all kinds of other stuff. And it's like, you're up late at 2:00 in the morning, and this happens. We got people relating to us at 2:00 in the morning. They realize, I'm not really a developer. I'm an HVAC company owner. I'm a caterer. I'm an auto manufacturer. That's what I do. That's my principal focus. But they got lost in the weeds a little. And that's when we come in and use our expertise, not only as the development house, but understanding what it's like to run companies. Every one of our leaders in Solutions Afoot have come from the CEO status. So they all know what it's like to be a funder or try to find money. It's knowing, and I think Josh said that earlier with the coaching, is that knowing that we understand outside of the coding space, the stressors that hit decision makers. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times where Caspio really, really shines, is that it gives people, no matter where you are in developing, a place that you can call home. And if you feel like you got a little further out than you should have, you can call people like Solutions Afoot, and we'll be right there in the building with you. And once we build it, it's yours, but we'll stay up as long as you like us to.
Well, Josh, Niki, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing the background regarding Solutions Afoot and what your expertise and areas are. And also thank you for sharing your thoughts on building the architecture of a relationship. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this of great interest. And thank you for being one of our premier partners for many years with many more successes ahead of us.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.